Okay, you know what? I haven't told anyone this, but screw it. A year and a half after hubby died, it was the Christmas season, and I bought the full series at the time of Downton Abbey, and they always have a Christmas episode every season. And I just so happened to be binge watching it. And the newest season was over a year old, so it was kind of coincidence that I was watching Christmas episode on Christmas Eve, so like the 23rd. And in that episode, the downstairs people of the estate, they're celebrating Christmas, and they had like a first year edition of the Parker Brothers, I think, board game, Ouija board. There's a lot of cool things about that show. Like, they showed the first couple of years of telephone and stuff, and then of course they showed the first year of like the board game Ouija, and that makes me uncomfortable. Like, I don't believe in that kind of thing, but it's just like a fictional show, and you just see the characters, playing with it. And this one young lady character, she was playing with it, and she had something happen to her that was on her heart. Spoilers, obviously, if you're watching Downton Abbey. So, one of the characters, she marries he's like her best friend, but she doesn't marry him romantically. He's like a war-wounded veteran, and he's like dying of his war wound, like it got infected or something. And so even though she had kind of friend-zoned him and wouldn't like date him, like, he proposed to her, even though he's like a few days away from death. And so of course she acquiesced, because like, I mean, that's a kindness, and it's a friend, and I guess, like, I mean, it's not like they were consummating the relationship anyway, so she like marries her friend in a ceremony, and she like doesn't say, well, she doesn't make that known to him. She's not like, well, I don't even think about you that way, so, but I'll do it. She doesn't do that. She just makes it normal. Like, it's normal to marry this guy, so he just like dies so like happy, like, that he loves her or whatever. And so she feels guilty. Like, she feels like everybody treats her like a real legitimate widow, but she feels like a fraud. Like, she feels like, I mean, I married him, but I didn't I loved him, but I didn't love him, so I feel hella guilty about all of this, like, oh, you poor young widow, like, and she's, like, wearing black, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, and, I mean, you would mourn your friend, like, you'd feel bad about one of your best friends dying, so it's, like, so she could feign, like, sadness really easily, because that's was a friend of hers, but she did not feel like a widow, like, at all. And she kind of inherited a father-in-law she wasn't expecting to inherit, and he just clung to her, tell me about my son, and the things you did together, and how close you were. And one of the reasons her friend wanted to marry her was because he wanted to take care of her, like, he had a little bit of an inheritance. So, gosh, this is like a lot of, this is a huge spoiler. Anyways, I'm like 3 minutes in. So, so she's playing Ouija for the first time, and of course, guess what spirit claims, to call into the game, So, coincidentally, and this to me was the second coincidence. The first coincidence is I'm watching a Christmas episode by chance, and it's Christmas. But her late husband's name was Will, and that's my late husband's name. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. And I carried some guilt too, not the same kind of guilt, but I did inherit also, and I felt kind of weird about that because I was only on the property for like months before he passed away, and it wasn't even his. Like, his dad signed it off to him. So it was like I had this weird, like, feeling, and, like, it's just, like, the board game, like, addressed that, like, so I was like, oh, this is creepy, right, because it's, like, same name, young widowhood, too, like, she's, like, a young lady. I was 25, at the time, and she's a young lady, and she feels like a fraud, and all of that. Anyways, right around, like, so the episode's wrapping up, but I do have 2 kids, and at the time, my eldest, like, would act up a lot at bedtime or sleepwalk. She would just misbehave, and I had a boyfriend at the time, and by then he had been in our lives for long enough that I had delegated some of the discipline to him, and I was like really like into this shit. Like, they had been in bed for quite some time, so I wasn't wanting to be interrupted, but so I was super into it, so I asked him to deal with it. Like, I would occasionally delegate, and I didn't know, I don't remember if I gave permission or not. I might have, but I'm not a big spanker, but he actually spanked her. He, like, swatted her. But the thing is, he never spanked a child before. Like, he wasn't a father, and he just knew that that's one of the many ways you discipline a child when they're misbehaving and won't go to bed. And so the thing is, he's like a big guy. He's like 6'5", and he's like, he comes out of the room and he's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't know my own strength. Like, I've never spanked before. I was like, what did you do? And he's like, well, I think I swatted her harder than I thought. Like, I didn't know it seemed to, like, leave a mark. Like, I was like, oh my God. So I just felt so bad, like, that I couldn't, like, I felt like like a kinship with this episode, and I delegated the discipline to somebody else, and, like, this spanking that was way too hard happened. And I'm not a spanker myself, but I do understand that some people do it. But so I was like, you know, wow. And he felt bad. He felt worse than I did. I felt bad for delegating in the first place, and he felt like, oh no, you know. And then all of a sudden, I felt like straight ahead, which makes no sense because TV was straight ahead, but I hear, hit me with your best shot, Pat Benatar, right? I'm like, what? Of course he heard it too, because it wasn't a fake thing, it's a real thing. It's like Pat Benatar song, a favorite song of Will's. So, and I recognized it immediately. Obviously, this was, at the time, Paper Jam's guitars were a big deal. They had a blue one and a pink one for girls and, like, girl singers. And this particular Paper Jam's guitar, it had a Pat Benatar song, a Blondie song, One Way or Another, and a Pretender song. Don't Lead Me On or something like that. I can't remember how the song goes. Anyways, all of a sudden, randomly, this Paper Jam's guitar fires off, and I don't know where it is, and it's Hit Me With Your Best Shot. And Will knew how I felt about spanking, and he hardly ever did. Like, he barely did, and he was good at it because he would have a lesson plan. He would do talking before and after, like. So, and it strummed itself again, like it went off again. And that creeped him out, so he left, because he was like, that's really weird. And I explained what it was. I was like, oh, this was Will's last Christmas present, but we couldn't find it. Where was the sound coming from? I knew it was the Paper Jam's guitar. I was like, and I didn't know why I couldn't find it. They have a toy box, they have a bedroom. It certainly wasn't in their bedroom, which doesn't make sense. I didn't know where it was. So he goes home, creeped out, obviously. And I'm, like, crying. I'm looking for it. I'm like, where are you? I'm looking straight ahead. Straight ahead is the kitchen behind the wall. So I'm like, I guess this guitar is in the kitchen. I mean, because I'm hearing it straight ahead of me. And and I hear it strum again, but this time behind me. So I'm like, yep, it's in the kitchen, because I'm deeper in the kitchen. So I'm like, it's behind me. I can't find it, and I can't find it. And then I'm crying. I fall to my knees, and I put my head in my hands, and I say, stop torturing me, because it's like too many coincidences, you know, like, just that song choice, Hit Me With Your Best Shot, and I kind of use spanking as hitting, and, you know, and she was such a daddy's girl, and it just felt sarcastic to me. I don't know. Like, it just, I don't know. Like, so I'm like crying, why must you torture me? And like, and then I hear it again, but it's right above my head. I look up, I'm at the refrigerator, and it's the lip of the guitar, like right at the half circle is poking out, and it's on top of the refrigerator. And I immediately remember that my daughters were fighting over this guitar. Sophie was saying, no, it's mine, you can't have it, but the younger one had it first. So they're fighting over it, and so typical mom, neither of my children is the evil one. I just remove the offending item out of the way. Like, that's what's pulling them apart. They're fighting over a toy, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove this guitar from the scenario and put it on top of the fridge where they both can't reach it. And that was my discipline method for that situation. And I had forgotten it up there. I put it up there months and months and months ago. And it did make sense that they were fighting over it because, like, they were just air guitaring it anyways because the battery had died. That's why it was so weird that it played itself. So, I looked at it, I grabbed it, and I flipped the guitar over, and I looked at the options. You know, there's a freestyle, and then there's, you know, the Blondie, the Pat Benatar, the Pretender song, and on-off switch, and it was in the off position. And I was like, what, how is it in it? It said it did the song, and I'm crying, and the show, and it's off. And it's not only it's off, it's dead. Like, that's why it didn't make sense. I was like, why are you fighting over this? It doesn't work right now. I have to buy new batteries for it. And it used a different kind of batteries that I didn't have. Like the watch kind, I think, maybe. Or something. It just used a battery I didn't have at the time. So, it played that. But I was endeared to it, too. I eventually did, put it back in the toy box. I still hadn't bought new batteries for it, and every, like, once a month or so, it would strum itself and play one of the songs. Alright. And so that was really weird. One time we were cleaning up house, and my boyfriend at the time threw it away because it bothered him. He said it was haunted, so. Anyways, so that's what happened. It was really weird, and I don't know where to put that. So, anyways, I'm going to read a poem, and it has a slight reference to that, but it's not about that. But you don't need to know that story to understand the poem, but it's just, yeah. Anyways, let me read it. It's called Tunneling. And it's from, let's see what stage it's from. It's probably, I disagree, inevitability. Oh, it's from Guilt. That totally makes sense, actually. It's from Guilt. Okay, Tunneling. There's another side of the light expecting me, but I hesitate. I hear your name in old circles. It gets me down. So they commiserate with me, or so they think. And the corner of our room sounds the toy electronic guitar strumming itself. It must be missing you, causing my skin to quake. Until you find me in the bedroom beneath the quiet quilt, like a child terrified, I tremble and say, go away. How much longer will this go on? The feeling followed, the forgetting and recalling, as if in simulcast. Fraught, I reach for the knife, not knowing what's on the other side of the wound. A new life, oblivion, or you. But I hesitate.